Okay.
No
All
problem.
right. So, welcome to the Coder Kids podcast. I'm James Thornock. I'm the online operations manager, and we have a guest on the show with us today. Her name is Dora Palfi. We're very excited to have her, and you're going to learn all about her. Just kind of a quick little introduction. She is the co-founder and CEO of imagiLabs. She's done a lot of charity work in a lot of different countries and volunteered across 4 continents. She currently lives in Sweden and was also given the award of the Nordic 100 most impactful startups and people. So there's a lot of things that Dora's been doing. She's a mover and a shaker, and a lot of really great things she's been doing, and we have so many questions for her today. So I think if anybody fits on the Coder Kids podcast, it's going to be her. Um, she's a great example, and I think we're just going to dive right in. So, um,
Thank you for the introduction.
yeah, no,
Very
absolutely.
well.
Well, thank you for living an awesome life that's worthy of an introduction, right? So, when it comes down to it, I did a little bit of digging. And on your Instagram, you said that as a little girl, you wanted to do, you didn't say brain surgeon, you said like a brain doctor, I think. Is that what you said?
Right, correct.
Yeah,
I,
so
I
before we even get into coding, it sounded like you had a pretty specific um, dream. And just to juxtapose like my own self, I wanted to be a dolphin trainer and then a doctor and then, so many different things. And, I really didn't have a vision of what I really wanted to do until maybe like 2 years ago. And
mm,
so for me, it was, I'm jumping from idea to idea so frequently. And so stuck with it through college. I don't want to give too many spoilers here. Um, so, what gave you that kind of dream and that idea, like even as a young girl?
Interesting. Well, yes, a lot of questions in one, but I
Sorry.
really did love, no, it's good. I did love science, or I think maybe just problems in general. I wouldn't necessarily say I just like science because actually I liked a lot of different subjects. I like to read, so I just enjoyed learning about the world. I also
Hmm.
like to discover new things, and I think it's interesting because I generally enjoyed a lot of different subjects, but growing up, I felt like the norm was that as girls, if we liked science, we had to become doctors or care about humans and biology and not do so much of physics and math, even though I really, really loved those subjects.
Hmm.
And so I started to gravitate towards this idea pretty early on that, okay, I like science. I had to do something doctory, but then I wanted something very exciting and specific. And I think the brain just kind of like spoke to me as a very mysterious organ that we don't quite understand. And I really liked big challenges. So I thought that would be a challenge worthy sort of uh, spending my career on. But you did give a spoiler that I did stick with this all the way through college, but in the end, I actually ended up not being a brain researcher. So I think
Hmm.
I had this attitude of wanting to stick to the things that I set my mind to. But luckily, I also had enough exposure to new and different ideas that I ended up switching up my mind.
Yeah. Well, that is interesting. So you have this, you talk about this like desire to kind of fulfill on, is it like a promise that you made to yourself, or is it like when you say, stick to things, what do you mean?
Mm. Yeah, that's an interesting question. I have you heard of the book Grit? It's one of my
Yeah, I
favorites.
have. Is it
one of
Duckworth? Is that?
exactly one of
Okay,
my
yeah.
favorite books probably. And just recently we had sort of like a lunch and learn at our startup, and we discussed this topic. And so the whole concept of grit, right, is knowing that you sort of like have to stick with things to be able to actually get results. And as a child, I did competitive athletics, so I really, developed this mindset that actually you have to work hard to get results. And I think that was what really helped me develop this mentality that actually it's hard work that will deliver results and not necessarily like skills and talent. And I think I developed this sort of crazy like open mindset very young, that I thought that actually working hard will get me to places as opposed to just being lucky and having a certain talent. And so I think because of that, I was pretty set on sticking with my plans and ideas.
Wow, that's really neat. Yeah, I was introduced to the idea of grit through the Freakonomics podcast. So
Mm-hmm.
Angela Duckworth is, I'm amazed I even remembered that name. But you know, featured on that one frequently. I think she's, doing some other collaboration with them now. But she's always really entertaining to listen to, and her stuff is science backed, and so it's great. Yeah, very very
Yeah.
fascinating stuff. Yeah, and
Mm-hmm.
that's such a man. That is such a hopeful idea too. So I'm just attracted to anything that can kind of give people hope, right? And so
Mm-hmm.
the idea of grit is great because it's something you can practice, right? It's something that, like, I'm supposed to be the interviewer, right? So I'm not supposed to go on. I apologize. But like I love that anybody can practice it. Anybody can get better at grit. It's not
Mm.
just inborn talent, because that's a little bit less fair, right? But it's
Yeah.
like anybody can practice grit on any end of the spectrum. And so
Yeah.
um that's
And
really inspiring.
I think that's especially like relevant to coding and math. Or I think there has been this kind of like concept that to be good at math, you have to be sort of like born with that talent. And I just have a very sort of radical view on this, that I think pretty much anyone can become anything, and we can learn anything. It's really the majority comes with hard work. So I did happen to like maths, which was like not a common thing for girls. But I
Mm-hmm.
also happened to actually have it as my pretty much only job as a teenager, was tutoring maths for other students. And
Oh
I
wow.
think I discovered this, actually, this gave me a lot of sort of like purpose and happiness, that I could help students not just become really good at the subject, but actually start loving it. So students who were pretty much failing their math classes, like after a few months of tutoring with me, actually got like A's and really good grades. And I think that experience for me was such like a huge proof that anyone can learn anything and become good at anything. And I think I carried this with me even until today. So I really believe that just like math, coding is for everyone, and it's more of a matter of how it's being introduced. And yeah, so there's nothing that should come between us and learning new things other than our own motivation.
Well, that is really inspiring. I think any teacher, right, that's had that either tutor student relationship or teacher student relationship. I taught in public school for a little while here, teaching Texas history, which fascinating subject. I assume they don't teach it in Sweden or in Hungary, but uh, you know, you still have those light bulb moments, and those feel so good, right? And I think you're right. This belief that you have that anyone can become anything through grit and what you say. I don't want to like put words in your mouth, but yeah, it's also a little bit addictive, and like I suppose in a good way, right? In that your ideas don't just come from like the ether; they come from like actual practice. Like you've put in, I think, a good deal of practice. So, all right, well, I'll stop putting words in your mouth. I do apologize, but as a teacher myself, like we're very passionate about making that happen and exposing everyone to coding that we can. So I guess let's go right into coding. I think that's a great segue. Um, you've kind of shifted. So tell me a little bit about that shift that happened, I guess, in
Right.
college. If I remember, it had
Mhm.
something to do with a project you were working on, and
Mm.
if you want to dive into
Exactly.
that.
So yeah, I mean, as much as I think it's amazing to stick with the plans that we have, I also am happy that I got to learn to just try out new things. And coding for me started with sort of like doing scientific work and scientific research, and then understanding that like computers are so essential in any work that you're doing these days. And being able to understand data was part of my work. And I started to dig deeper into programming and decided to take my first computer science course actually in college. So it was quite late. I always say this, I used to be a good student and I was doing terribly in my computer science class, but it was the first time in my life that I felt like I don't even care what grade I get because I just enjoyed so much that I was creating projects that came to life. Like it wasn't about writing a test and knowing the answers, but it was actually about creating something that works and could be useful for others. So for the first time, I felt like, wow, I'm learning for the sake of like learning, so I can create something and not just to get good grades. And so that's how I became really excited about coding and sort of the potential of programming and technology and being able to make solutions happen. And I think it was in my first sort of like hackathon. I'm not sure if the listeners know what a hackathon is, but essentially it was a small contest where teams of students could come up with solutions to real world problems and create prototypes using their coding skills quickly, where we created a solution to monitor, essentially a health monitoring device. And we built a solution that could actually help people's lives in 48 hours. I remember that was kind of like the big switch for me when I decided, okay, I really want to do more with tech. And through that, I gained like more and more interest. I finished a minor in computer science in college. I worked as a developer, but it's something that did happen, and I started to notice that was both in science and in computer science that there weren't so many women around, and there weren't so many girls interested in the subject, but also there weren't so many role models who were kind of like ahead of me in this career. And so this topic has been kind of bothering me or almost frustrating because I thought, okay, technology is an awesome career. You have great job opportunities, not only in terms of your potential pay, but also in terms of like satisfaction and how much you can achieve with your work and how exciting it is. And it's really sort of the power that is going to be shaping our future and just becoming even more important. So why are there not more women involved with the field? Like if we want technology to serve everyone, we also need diversity among the creators of technologies. And so that motivated a lot of my work moving forward. And during my master's degree, I had a project where I set out to co-create a product idea with girls that would make it more fun and relevant for them to start learning to code. Because based on both my research and a lot of other research done by organizations such as Google, show that already at around age 12, girls start dropping their interest for computer science and technology, even though when they are younger, they still have similar interests to boys. And so this has been the project that I've been now working on for a couple of years. Trying to create a scalable solution to make more girls maintain or develop their interest for coding and technology.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. There's like so many questions that popped up when you were talking. I was like, well, how did you do this, and how did you decide to do that? Um, yeah. So I guess like asked like I don't know if I asked this yet. So why coding specifically? Is it like what you talked about with the being able to create something and then see something that you've created? Is that kind of what got you into it?
Right. I would say yes, it's very much so. So I refer to coding most often as almost like a superpower. And I also do agree with it being referred to as sort of the new literacy because I think it's just going to be so fundamentally important in everything that we do in the future. And so having an understanding of it, at least, even though if you're not going to be actively coding, but understanding and just not being afraid of it, not thinking of it as a black box is going to be so important for all of us. So yes, that's pretty much what got me excited about it, thinking of it as a tool. So not necessarily coding for the sake of coding, even though that's also fun sometimes, just solving problems, but just thinking of it as a means to an end, being able to create solutions, being able to create products that can help others in their everyday life. And this is sort of our path there.
Yeah, that's so great. Yeah, there are absolutely just a ton of problems that we have in the world, and I mean it is 2020 for heaven's sake, so we know there are lots of problems out there that could use fixes, and they're all. I think you're right that like a lot of people have great ideas, and everybody can be a creator of some kind, and with I think maybe this is a point that I'm making, but I think when you when you have those ideas and those kind of like the passion behind it, and then you have the skill and then the grit, I think, and you put them together, I think it's great, right? Because then you can actually solve problems,
Right.
and I think that's what's beautiful. I'm thinking of like a simple one on the Apple Watch, which mine fell on the floor and shattered, so I don't have it anymore. For those of you on YouTube, I have a bare wrist. There's no Apple Watch there anymore, but there's an app on there. It's the Breathe app, and I think
Hmm.
one of the modern day problems that we have, and maybe just a tiny little solution was, so there's a lot of anxiety that a lot of people experience, and someone thought, hey, it'd be a good idea to like teach people how to breathe, which maybe I'll ask you a little bit about breathing because I feel like you'd know a lot. And I used the app a couple of times. I didn't do it religiously, but whenever I
Mm.
did actually feel better. And that was something that was just because I had an Apple Watch, just because it was there, and I just tried it out. And so the person who created that, they changed the world at least like a little bit. And I think,
Mm.
for the better. And so that's just one super small example. Again, it's not like, I don't know that it saved any lives. Maybe it did. Who knows? But I think, the work that I'm trying to do, and I'm assuming, and so maybe I'll ask you, the work you're trying to do has to do with making the whole world better, not just Sweden or where I live in Texas, or, like we want everybody to have a nicer time of it. So, what do you think? Is that kind of what you're working for? Is that a good, yeah?
Yes, definitely. Certainly. I know it's almost like a cliche startups trying to change the world, but really,
Right.
I think
Yeah.
if you are putting your heart into something, you probably have to care about it enough because otherwise you would quit when the first problems arise. Building a company is extremely tough. But it's also a matter of, for me, I really think that my life is sort of too short to spend it on things that I don't believe contribute in a meaningful way to our society and our planet. And so I
Hmm.
really actively chose to work on something that I think can create meaning and value day after day. Kind of dedicating my resources, my talent, and time to something that I believe has a power to make a change.
Well, that's awesome. Well, I think we should jump right into it then.
Yes,
So
exactly.
why don't you why don't you talk about your work at imagiLabs, kind of how that came about, and
Hmm.
the solution that you're bringing to market essentially. Would like to
Right.
talk about that, and then we can talk about yoga and stuff later. But I think uh,
Awesome.
so I'd love to hear about this your journey kind of into that, and what you've got.
Right. So, as you mentioned, I started to work on a project to create a product together with girls that could make coding more fun and relevant, and really started out with just listening and co-creating with girls. I think it's a very sort of Scandinavian thing to do. Actually, I you probably know IKEA, the big Swedish furniture
For
store.
sure, for sure.
They actually apply the same technique where they bring in real people and prototype together with them and create their new product line together with them. And I did the same. I brought in girls and we had paper and clay and pencils and we came up with different product ideas. Some of them were really out of this world, some of them were very realistic. And I analyzed all these solutions and found out that it seemed like girls really enjoyed sort of creativity and self-expression, having things that they could customize. They also seem to really care about doing things with their friends and in a
Mm,
social manner. And it's maybe a no-brainer, but we discovered that phones are the number one device that teens and youngsters today care about, as opposed to computers, even, especially when it comes to girls.
yeah.
And so bringing these things together, we saw that there's an opportunity by linking girls' interests together with coding. We created a so-called tangible device. It's a smart accessory. So I have a box here of the imagiCharm, which yeah, so we call it a smart accessory. You can hang it on your backpack or carry it around in whatever way you prefer to use it. And if I turn it on, it sort of wakes up, opens its eyes, and then it's ready to be programmed. And we also have an app, which is an extremely visual app it has a community feed where our users are sharing coding projects. So you can
Hmm.
see here a bunch of fun animations and projects. I'll pick actually one that it was mine that I created. And you can see received a few comments, a very popular project. I can open it up, see the code. It's written in Python, so it is a real programming language that you can learn in our app. And if I run the code and want to upload it to my device, then it will show up, and I can see this heart that I programmed. So the way this works is through programming. See, you're able to create pixel art, pixel animations, and through the process actually um, gain coding superpowers and learn programming concepts. And by bringing the community aspect in it, we are kind of tapping into that social component so that our users can get inspired by what others are making and share their knowledge and share their creations with their fellow coders. We also do have a Discord community, just like you, where we can support with
Great.
extra coding knowledge. And in our app, there's also sort of step-by-step tutorials where the users can start gaining these superpowers, as we call them, and you literally get the badges for getting the superpower. So that's, I think, a really fun
Oh,
part of it.
nice. I love badges.
Yes, badges are great. But really, so this is sort of the first step. We just launched this product a couple months ago. We had a Kickstarter campaign last summer. So thanks to 620 people who believed in us, we were able to make it happen and actually manufacture these gadgets. And then since then, we started to go out to the market and reach more youngsters with the fun and the joy of learning to code. Um, so that's kind of like a broad overview. And in the future, we're planning to expand to different coding languages, to different, as we call them, experiences. So it's not just limited to our 8x8 matrix, even though you can do a whole lot with it. There has been over 5,000 different projects, and you'd be surprised that, like first we just created hearts, but there has been fruits and different characters from Batman to Super Mario, but also very like specific things. Like here in Sweden, we have this national day for cinnamon buns, which was just a couple days ago. So
Oh,
then
that's what that
a
was about.
cinnamon, yeah, that was a cinnamon bun that appeared in the app. That's why.
Okay, okay, that's great. I was like,
Yeah.
what? It's got it. Is that a thing? Yeah, is that a thing? That's awesome. Well, for those of you who are just listening to the podcast, not actually watching the YouTube video, I'll describe just a little bit what's
Oh,
going on visually. No, that's fine. No, so the imagiCharm is, what is it, like 2 by 2 inches? Is that roughly? I mean, I guess I don't know in centimeters, so it's roughly two by
yeah.
two inches. It's really soft. So I actually have one here. Spoiler.
Right.
Yeah, so it's really soft, and the 8x8 grid of LEDs, they could be any color essentially, right?
Mm-hmm.
That you
Yeah, so there
want.
are RGB LEDs, so it means like a mix of red, green, and blue. So in the code, you can define sort of like how much red or green or blue you want to kind of mix into the lights.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And there's lots of ones that are like lightning bolts and rainbows and hearts and like I think it's a pineapple. Anyway, there's lots that you could do. It's also like really satisfying to hold. Like
I
so I don't know,
agree.
great job on that, but like tactile wise, it feels really good. Um, so
We went through a lot of samples. We should have some photos of it when we had like
oh
20
yeah.
samples and the whole team was just like, how does this feel? A
So
lot goes into designing a product.
yeah, oh goodness, I'd like to talk to you about that maybe another time too. That'd be cool. But the other thing, so Dora was holding up the iPhone app. It's also on Android, I'm assuming.
Yes.
Okay, so it's on iPhone, it's on Android. It's a little bit of a social platform as well. So she was holding up the project, and then underneath that there was the Python code that
Mm-hmm.
anybody can use to actually code what actually shows up on the imagiCharm. Now the app is free from what I understand. You can
Yes.
do it without getting the imagiCharm, but it's definitely easier to express yourself with the imagiCharm, right? On your backpack
Correct.
or purse, or you just hold it and show people this is me, right?
Hmm.
Um,
Exactly.
so hopefully like that's a bit of a visual over audio. because we do have both kinds of people. So
Of course, yeah.
the so you really believe in bringing a lot of people in who are going to be the end users of this, the Swedish or IKEA model. That's really smart. Um, you know, I know you're also a business owner. There's like a lot of things you have to think about, and you're obviously customer focused and faced. Um, what what is it like being your own boss? Like, what are some of the pros and what are some of the cons of kind of waking up and deciding what you're going to do? What is
Um,
that like?
yes, tough question. Well, yeah, I guess you're like your own boss, and that means that everybody else is your boss. Your customers
Yeah, that's the
are
funny thing.
your bosses. Your investors, your yeah, your users. So it's really about serving them and your team, because at the end of the day, it's also about making sure that my team enjoys the work that they do, and they care to come to work. But I mean, of course, it does come with the benefit of sort of being flexible in your schedule. But again, work on something you love and you want to work a single minute means that you're actually just going to be constantly working. So at the end of the day, it's you probably do end up working a lot, but it won't feel like work. So that's what I can say. It's like, yeah, it has this like flexibility, but also you have to be really strict on yourself. And then you also technically don't have a time limit that you have to work, which probably means that you end up working a lot more. But I truly love it. I love doing it together with my team. So to me it's been all positive. But I would also say, I think it's interesting, right? When you don't have a boss, nobody's there to tell you if you're doing a good job or you're not doing a good job. There's no like kind of external ways to measure how well you're doing. So at the end of the day, it will be up to you to stay motivated and to stay engaged, and that comes with it's becoming your responsibility to take the breaks that you need for your self-care. So you really have to, I think, have kind of, yeah, like strict rules and keep them and respect your own boundaries. So this has been a learning journey for me in that sense.
Wow, that's awesome. Again, what you said, I have so many questions about. But I do have to say that you're absolutely correct, right? It's so funny because I think when you're a kid, when I was a kid anyway, so I won't assume anyone else thinks this, but I thought, oh, being your own boss means like you only have to work like 10 hours a week and you like control and manage a bunch of people and like nobody can tell you what to do. And the actual feeling of running a business, like I do as well, yours is a little bit different kind of a business, is like everyone's my boss.
Yeah.
It's the opposite feeling. You're absolutely right. Where anyone who buys an imagiCharm, which by the way, please go and do, and we will also be having a course with these, and so maybe you'll end up with the one that's in my hands right now or whatever. So look forward to those classes in the springtime. But it's there's this just like weight of accountability, I think, for the companies that are at least successful. I mean, most businesses go out of business pretty quickly, we know.
Correct.
And so maybe it's just the ones that are left that can adapt, and there's a little bit of luck involved. I have to admit, I've been blessed in a lot of ways that had nothing to do with me. But at the end of the day, if you got that grit and if you're customer focused, I think, yeah, you end up working a lot of hours. That's what I find as well. So, um, I do have a couple of questions just because I am kind of running the show, and I am just actually super curious. So,
Mhm.
um, two things. Where do you look for judgment? And I don't mean negative judgment that's like not
Mhm.
contributing anything, but like a kind of a positive view of judgment where you can, it could be like a friend or a confidant or a business associate where you say, hey, this is what I did. How do you think I did on this? And they give you like
Mm.
honest feedback. Is there anywhere that you go for that? Are there any books that you read or any people that you go to?
Right. Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. I think I do read a lot of books on both like business and management and just learning and leadership. And I think you sort of have to have different people or for different roles and different type of criticism. So when it comes to like how are we doing with the product, I think like you have to take the red pill and sort of like me myself, I still go and just sit down and listen to actual girls who are in our target group, like use the app and just be bluntly honest. I actually love working with young people because they're really honest and they want to
It's
cover
true.
up and be too nice to you. Because I think if your end users would be adults, they would just be too kind to you. I have a background in UX design and actually learned this trick from one of my bosses before, where whenever we did a user test, even if we were the ones who designed the product, we would say, "Oh, we were not the actual designers. We're just the ones testing it. So feel free to be honest. You're not hurting our feelings."
Mm.
And so I always try to apply different techniques to make sure people can be really honest about what works and doesn't work for them. And I try to do the same with my team, have a space where you can give feedback. And I think the best way of ensuring that happens is like creating a space when there is a meeting to actually provide feedback, and also
Hmm.
giving feedback in return, and then acknowledging the criticism that I receive and then acting on it probably brings more encouragement to my team to bring up feedback later. And then of course I'm also lucky to have some how to say more senior advisors who are able to look at my business and how we're doing and point out my the blind spots that I'm not noticing, which actually I must say is really tough. I'm a first time business founder and I also don't have a lot of years of experience from other workplaces. So of course I really appreciate kind of more senior advisors, especially ones who have been running their own businesses. I think that's extremely useful for advice. So I sort of have different type of people championing for different things. And of course, you also need some feedback from your friends to check on you, how you're doing as a human, because at the end of the day, it's not just about how you're doing as a business owner. You have to kind of fulfill your different roles as well, how you're doing as a friend. So
Well, that is actually the next question I wanted to ask, which I find super fascinating. This is something I struggle with a lot, just to put that out there. But how do you find that? How do you find that balance? How do you, how are you vulnerable enough to kind of let your friends in on, like, hey, I could probably use a break. I look like a shell of a human being right now. Like, what are some things that you do, or who do you go to, and what are some, yeah, I guess I'm just asking for myself. Let's be honest. I'm being a little bit selfish here.
yeah.
Like, I want to know how to get more balance. How do you do that?
Yeah. Well, you've been hinting at the fact that I do yoga very actively. I'm a yoga instructor, and I joke with this quite a bit that thank God I'm an instructor because I can't cancel my classes last minute, right? If I was just attending, maybe I
Oh,
would
that's
not show
true.
up, but I can't give it a no-show. So that kind of forces me, no matter how busy things are, how crazy they are, like that 1 hour that I'm teaching is not going to change the world. And I think, yeah, like acknowledging that sort of being in this business and then in life in general is not a sprint, it's a marathon. And those 1 hour breaks will actually just give you more at the end of the day. I think that's really important to me. So setting these boundaries and I call it like time boxing. So actually dedicating time for when I'm going to be off and free and respecting that. I think that has been really important to me, and that's what I'm trying to do. So in advance set out that I'm going to not be working, but doing something fun in these 2 hours, and then actually respect that is kind of my strategy. I do have a brother who is a psychologist, so maybe I have this
Oh, lucky.
added benefit, right? Exactly. He has a PhD in psychology, so he's my go-to person when I'm completely lost. No, but yeah, I think trying to respect my me time and my friend time has been very important.
Well, that's really awesome. Do you have any like do you have any specific recommendations, like what's your ratios? I've recently heard of something from a YouTuber called CGP Grey. I don't know if you're familiar with his
Hmm.
channel. He's
No.
anyway, you should look him up. He's great. Shout out to CGP
Okay.
Gray. But he released a video called Weekend Wednesdays, and so what he does
Mm-hmm.
instead of taking Saturday, he works Saturday.
Oh.
He takes Wednesday as kind of like an entertainment and like whatever he wants to do day, to kind of take like a mental break. But then on
Okay.
Sunday, his like actual like rest day. So he's not gonna mow the lawn or do any kind of shopping or anything. He's just like more of like a zen kind of a day. But on
Mm-hmm.
on Wednesday he can kind of do errands for himself um and so I'm kind of doing a little experiment with that. I can't do that
Oh.
fully because we have after school classes on Wednesdays, so it's really just like Wednesday mornings for me. But are there any like specific ratios that you use, or
Mm.
are there like any you're like, oh, I'm gonna go hang out with my friends at this time every week? I mean, because I find in
Mm-hmm.
my personal life, if I don't put it on the calendar, then you're right. Like you can cancel the class on yourself, right? Essentially,
Right. Right.
if you're not
Yeah.
teaching it. So, what are some strategies that you? I'm so curious.
No, no, no. That's yeah, great question. Yeah, the book I read on the topic that was kind of helping me was Indestructible. Do you know that book? It's from
Did you
Near
say
Isle.
indistractable?
Yes, exactly, Indestructible.
Indistractable. Okay, I'll write
Mm-hmm.
it down here.
Um, but there weren't necessarily like strict like I guess recommendations on how many hours one should
Mm.
dedicate to what, and I think that kind of changes. I do love this idea of like taking a break on Wednesday and kind of regrouping it. What I realized for me, I guess if you try to make some sort of schedule that's very strict and very ambitious, and then you're gonna start failing at it, then you'll just get like you'll just lose your motivation and you'll stop having these set boundaries. So what I'm doing, I kind of just plan weekly. I'd say like every Sunday or Saturday, I already plan out for the next week which days I'm going to do exercise. I'm very, very big on exercise, and I think that helps me a lot. Exercise almost every day, but
Mm.
I do plan that out in advance. But I also think for me, I love change and I love kind of like new schedules. So I think that's more like a personal preference thing. So for me, actually, it helps that every week is a little different. But then I just make sure to plan that out at the beginning of the week. Like, when am I going to have time for my run, for my extra yoga, for my language learning, and for hanging out with friends? And I just do that on a weekly basis. I don't exactly know the ratio, but I actually think that you probably, I mean, there are some days when I can, go crazy and will work like 12, 14 hours. But in general, I don't think you can be productive for, let's say, more than 10 hours in any given day. And even that is kind of stretching it. So, yeah, I would say probably you need a decent amount of time off.
Yeah, yeah. So I guess listeners, you might still be in the dark. If you have any answers, though, please send me an email, james at
Yeah.
coderkids.com. I would love to know what is the perfect ratio so that I can thrive. And because I'm always trying to be more effective at work, because there's
Mm,
that account, and this everything just ties together, right? Like there's that accountability to parents. I want to make sure that we're delivering high quality classes for them and
right.
their kids, our students. And so obviously I want to get more done every day, and this podcast is in some ways a part of my rest because I get to talk to someone outside of the
Right.
organization and kind of bounce new ideas and new thoughts, and
Mm.
hopefully I think that actually spurs some creativity. So well,
That's true. But then I
fascinating.
would say I always notice when I decide to take time off, right? And I have some time to think, actually, I do come back with more creative ideas. And so that's
Hmm.
why that time away and for reflection is actually good for you and for your business in the long run.
Yeah, and I've heard this. So this is not necessarily like my epiphany, but I heard that um, time off is also something that you need to practice.
Right.
Because like I've heard that
Correct.
like if you take a couple days off and like but all you've just been like a workaholic for a year, you are like stressing because you don't have work, and so
Right.
maybe I guess like easing into it and then practicing like, oh, what are some things that I actually do enjoy, and paying attention to like how those make you feel. Anyway, this podcast is not a self-help guru podcast, so
No,
find your own
but
journey.
ultimately, yeah.
But I think we're all working on that, and it's nice to know that, we're both real people. We
Ultimately, one
want to
thing I
make it
would
better.
add, Joe, is that here in Sweden, it's very common for people to take 4 weeks off uh, in the summer.
Oh,
And
okay.
so I think
Yeah.
one incredible thing about that is that kind of taking long times away from work also forces you to set up your workplace in a way where it can like continue without you, which actually is pretty cool. So people, actually share knowledge or set up things that can go on, and so that they're not dependent on them. And I think that's a really good attitude to have. Eventually, if you want to create a business as well, making yourself not be a necessary part of every single you know ongoing effort is a really good goal to have. So I love that idea about
That's
creating
fascinating.
something that can go on without you.
Wow. Okay. Man, so many things I'm learning today. This is great. Dora, thank you so much. I do have, another question. So you I think you're raised in Hungary, Budapest, right? Is that right?
Correct.
And then you
Hmm.
moved to Sweden, and
In between to like 7 other countries, but yes.
and seven others. Okay. So, yeah, this question I just thought, I was like, man, you are really good, and it seems like whatever situation you're in, whatever country it is. So the question is simply, how are you so adaptable? You're like the chameleon
Mm.
for business or whatever. How do you make it work? Different cultures, different languages, I'm assuming. Obviously,
Mm.
your English has gotten,
Right.
much, much better over time. It's better than a lot of Americans that I know. So, how are you so adaptable? How do you make that happen?
Yeah, that's a great question. I thought about it. I actually really enjoy that. I would say I have very strong opinions about certain things, and then I'm really easygoing about the things that I think are not worth like kind of like a fight over. Like where are we having
Okay.
dinner? I'm not going to like be strongly opinionated necessarily because I just love to learn from others, from locals, and so I think this whole idea, even just going back to the beginning of the podcast, right? I have been always really curious. So I just love to experience new things. And so letting people around me show me their ways is actually something that I truly enjoy. And that
Mm,
makes me adapt quickly to new places because I'm just really curious to learn about everything around me. And the best way to do that is by listening and observing and by letting others like show you their ways of living and working. And so I just really enjoy that. And so I think that's how I kind of like managed being in different countries, just being extremely open minded to everything and all the new experiences. And I think, of course, the more you do it, the better you kind of become at it because it's always been such like a positive reinforcement cycle. Like sometimes I've been like, oh, I don't actually want to go to a new place. Like I really love it here. I became so comfortable here. But then every time I go to a new place, I'm like, wow, this is why I'm doing it. Like all these experiences teach me so much more about the world. So it's always been such a positive experience that then I just, yeah, kept doing it.
wow. Do you want to name drop some of those other countries and other
Name
cultures,
drop.
or?
Well, I did live in the US for a bit. I lived in
Okay.
New York. I've lived in the UAE, in Abu Dhabi. I have lived in Spain. I was in South America quite a bit for the longest time in Chile, but also was in Argentina and Colombia a little while, and in Norway, in Oslo, so back in Europe as well. That's pretty much I think the countries where I spent like more significant amount of time, but I did get to travel to a lot more other countries as well.
That's super awesome. Yeah, my sister, she lived in Chile for about a year and a
Oh,
half.
really?
Yeah, she did a religious mission, and yeah, she loved it. It was great. Loved the people and the culture. I myself lived in Russia, in Samara and Saratov,
Wow.
and learned Russian. My Russian's obviously really rusty right now, but
Mhm.
yeah, I mean,
That's
I
awesome.
feel like, tell me if I'm right. I don't know, but I feel like you learn a lot of humility too when you're learning about someone's culture. Also, like in their language, that was a
Mm.
surreal experience. Like, okay, first I have to learn another language. And Russian's not an easy language by any stretch of the imagination. Kind of on par with Japanese in the difficulty. They have some vowels that we don't have in English, and my accent was still pretty obvious, still is. And so you're trying to like erase your accent, trying to just sound as natural and normal as possible. And then in addition to that, you're listening to people. I think, one of the most moving things was I asked so we had an apartment that overlooked a Russian army base. This is so off tangent, but this is the history teacher in me, right? And
Okay.
and I asked him about, World War II and like what his opinions were, and hearing it from his perspective, it brought tears to my eyes. Fortunately, I had a big thick hat on and no one could tell, but I definitely teared up because
Mm,
there's a lot of sacrifice there. And
right.
so I do think it's pretty essential to get other people's views and to hear it from them instead of like through some weird media source. It's really nice to just talk
Right.
to humans, to real people, which is another reason why I love talking to you, Dora. So well, I would like to wrap up. I do have just two more questions. One is
Mm-hmm.
well, maybe you've already answered this, but I mean, if you are talking to parents or young girls or young boys themselves, what would you say when they're thinking about the future, when they're thinking about coding or they're thinking about other careers? Is there any advice that you'd give them that maybe you wish you would have heard like in the past?
I mean, I definitely do encourage like trying out new things because I touched upon this earlier that I was so committed to one thing just because I really like the idea of it. But I think ultimately we'll also all have to figure out if it's something we want to like work with. Because learning about something is one thing, but then actually spending every day working in a certain field is another thing. So I would say just try out new things, try out real world experiences as the most important. The reason why I do think though that coding is such like a universally useful thing to learn is because it's applicable to everything. And so that's the whole point. I think it's you have to find your interest, what you're passionate about, but tech and the knowledge of coding will most likely just be useful no matter where you end up. And so I think of it as sort of just like a generic use, universally useful skill. But other than that, you also need to find sort of like a passion and an interest, and that you can only do if you try out and experience, yeah, new things all the time.
All right, you heard it from Dora. Try stuff out, people. That sounds great. Is there any question that you think I should have asked but I didn't ask that you would like to answer?
Oh gosh. Yeah, no, there's been a lot of great questions. So not nothing really. And I'm so glad we touched upon this ultimate message that anyone can learn anything. So everyone just go learn some coding. And don't be afraid of it.
All right, sounds good. Well, that's a wrap. Thanks so much for joining us on the program, Dora. Again, we will be linking your socials, whatever you'd like to link below. So there's imagiLabs.com, I think. Is that
Exactly, that's
accurate?
correct. imagiLabs.com.
And then Twitter and all the socials will be in the
Yes, we're
link
all
as
the
well.
socials.
Yeah, so that's it. We will be having an imagiLab or a imagiCharm class in the
Mhm.
springtime, so look forward to that. Feel free to sign up. I think that'll be the middle school and the high school level. And
Perfect.
you'll actually get one of these imagiCharms. If you can't wait till then, you can go to their website and pick one up. Start learning to code. I mean, the future, our kind of motto at Coder Kids is, well, I should just know this off the top of my head, but it's, coding the future, right? And so it's not actually me that's going to be directly coding the future. We want to expose students to coding that have not been exposed before and who are going to make that better world that we're talking about. So,
Mm.
this is what we're passionate about. So thanks so much for listening. This one went, a little bit longer than normal or just about as long as it typically goes. But if you'd like to reach out to us for future guests, feel free, James at coderkids.com. And until next time, we'll see you later.
Thank you.